We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and okay, everybody, just take a deep breath, loosen your sphincters. We don't need any rush hour Rambos here. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. This week, we are talking the 1990 film Predator 2. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the Apex co-host, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've dived into Predator 2, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
I am too. I actually had never seen this movie before. I've seen the original a number of times. Love it. Great. It's classic. I've seen Predators, the reboot directed by Robert Rodriguez, but I knew the reputation of this one. I knew a few key plot details, but never sat down and watched it until preparing for this episode, which comes here in the month of August, which is our Predator and Alien month. So every episode in the month of August is going to be from the Predator or Alien franchise, or maybe in both franchises. Hint, hint, wink, wink. What could that be? If you want to see the complete lineup of movies for the month, be sure to hop into our Discord. We'll tell you all about it there. But we're kicking things off with Predator 2. Pretty well timed. Not a coincidence, actually, that if you're listening to this the week it comes out, Prey is coming out this Friday, August 5th, which is the latest film in the Predator franchise. As of right now, of course, we don't know if that's going to quote-unquote qualify for our show. We don't know if it'll be poorly received. We've just seen the trailers, and I gotta say, Andrew, it looks pretty good.
It looks pretty rad. I'm way into it, so I'm actually pretty excited for that. Kind of bummed that it's straight to Hulu of all things. So
yeah, definitely one that I think would benefit from being in theaters. Although I did read a bit about the movie takes place. It's Native American, so it's way back in time before America was established. And they speak a actual native language, and it's a little unclear on the details, but it looks like they actually filmed the movie in English and in the native language, and you can choose the dialogue that you want to hear as you watch the movie. It's kind of unclear if it's a dub or if they actually have footage of them, mouthing the appropriate words. But either way, it's a very cool option that you wouldn't have in a theater. So there's one plus. Hashtag Positivity Podcast is one plus for it going straight to streaming.
it also takes place in 1719, just to clarify. So we're already in the process of ruining it. We just haven't quite formed our own country yet.
Yes. Positivity Podcast, Andrew. Easy.
Hashtag PP.
But if you want to watch that movie with us, we're going to be watching it in the Discord. Join us on August 7th. It's the Sunday after it comes out. And we're going to be streaming it with the community. So if you're not there already, there's a link in the show notes. Go ahead and join. And look forward to watching that with everyone. It should be a good time. But for now, let's talk about this movie, Predator 2, which was released November 21st, 1990, just in time for the holiday season, Andrew. Made on a budget of $25 million. At the box office, it only brings in $57 million. Probably an amount that's going to cover the production budget, but is not bringing in any significant profits for the studio. Critically, it's not that well received. It holds just a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. That reception is down quite a bit from that first movie, which was well received at the time. Its legacy has only grown. It holds an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a big dip in critical reception and box office. Hence why it's got its own episode of Best of the Rest.
But hey, we're here to talk about the good stuff.
The good stuff. The movie was written by Jim and John Thomas. a writing team of brothers responsible for the first film as well. After this movie, they would go on to write Wild Wild West. I got a feeling we might be talking about these guys again.
Yeah, they get a story credit on that one, so they wrote something for it. But yeah, I could definitely see those guys entering our orbit again in the future, one way or another.
Yeah, looking at their filmography, it's like that looks like a good career. Like you and your brother penning some movies every few years, they get picked up. Yeah, that's a good life.
And hey, they wrote Mission to Mars, the Brian De Palma Mars movie that came out in the year 2000.
Such a weird movie. We oddly talked about that in another episode.
Yeah, I know. It's very strange. Just ironic how it all informs itself. It all comes back around, man. So
the movie was directed by Stephen Hopkins. Before this film, the most high-profile film he directed, I would say, is probably A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Would go on to direct The Ghost in the Darkness. Andrew, have you seen that movie? You remember that one? The Lion movie with Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas?
Oh, yeah. I haven't watched that one in a long, long time.
I haven't watched it in easily over 20 years, but I saw it all the time in the late 90s. I think we had it on VHS. It was on cable. If I turned it on, it was halfway through, I'd watch the rest. I've looked at, I don't remember a lot of the plot details, but I looked at like the Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, and apparently, I mean, it's a little rough, the reception, but I remember very much enjoying that movie.
Yeah, he's got a very interesting career because he's the second unit director on Highlander, of all things. And then gets his first solo direction with an Australian slasher film called Dangerous Game. That's just a very, very strange movie, not starring anybody you really ever heard of. But then he does Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Predator 2, does a movie I actually kind of like called Judgment Night. It's kind of an action crime thriller with our good, the greatest actor of all time, Emilio Estevez. And
too bad they don't have your quote to put on the box of that movie. I kind of like it.
I kind of like it. Then he does Ghost of the Darkness, also does The Lost in Space, the late 90s adaptation of the television show. I remember he randomly did a television film called The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, where Jeffrey Rush played Peter Sellers in a movie. And I think he actually won an Emmy for it. So, and still out there directing television stuff today. So, good for you, Steven.
Good for you,
Getting
Steven.
it done.
Man, Lost in Space. Andrew, did you see that movie? The Matt LeBlanc version, the movie?
I don't know if you remember. I remember when my parents first got a DVD player. It came with this like mail order rebate for like 6 DVDs for $1. And Lost in Space was one of those DVDs. So it was literally one of the first movies I ever.
Complete lack of surprise.
I am one of those, like when we first. So literally, it was one of the only movies we owned on DVD when we first got a DVD player. And I'm dating myself quite horrifically with that statement. So, yes, needless to say, though, watched that movie a lot in my teenage years.
I don't think I ever saw it, but I remember the trailer very well. I remember being like, oh man, Joey from Friends, he's in like a big action movie. It's so weird. I remember that shot of him turning to the camera and then the helmet like slides down his face like in stages, like but I don't know why. I never saw the movie for the context. And I had never seen the show Lost in Space. My parents told me, oh yeah, it's like an old sci-fi show, but I had like no context for what this was based on.
Right.
To this day, I haven't watched it, but look, that's another one that maybe down the road we'll talk about on this podcast.
We'll see. Yeah.
It's funny you remember getting like that DVD player, because it's same. I remember my family getting like our first DVD player for Christmas, I think, like from the grandparents or whatever. And the thing was like massive. It was like as big as a VCR. Like it had,
right. It was huge.
It was thick and hefty. And the DVD that we got was Shrek. And since it was our only DVD, it was always in the DVD player. And the menu was like always idly on the TV, like in between watches of the movie Shrek. And it's like an animated menu that loops. And there's this is burned into my brain. There's the 3 little pigs from the movie. And every now and then one of them goes, play the movie. Yeah, play. And
I feel like I remember
day,
this.
to this day, my family like quotes that. Like, if we're gonna start a movie, play the movie, play. We're recording the Shrek DVD menu, but
Oh man,
we all heard
what
it thousands of times on loop because it's the only DVD we had.
That is a very. You have now dated yourself horrifically as well. So
Yeah.
everyone on the show knows exactly where we sit as people now. So,
Man, since we're down this rabbit hole, do you remember? I mean, obviously, you remember like the days of like VHSs, like DVDs didn't exist.
Obviously.
I remember my cousin's house, and they were. My cousins are like well off, like have their own business, and they're very like successful and wealthy family. And what I associate with that, with like having wealth in the 90s, is they had a dedicated VHS rewinder. It wasn't a VCR.
Yes.
It was you fit it in and it rewind your VHS super
that was
fast.
It was a specific tape rewinder. They had, I mean, that was the same thing they'd have at like video stores. You were in a whole different class if you had the tape rewinder. Otherwise, if you wanted to watch two tapes back to back, you either had to be a savage and not rewind it, or kill all your momentum by waiting for the tape to rewind.
Yeah.
So
you could pop in the second VHS of Titanic and rewind the first at the same time.
Chris, that's not the example I would have gone with, but okay.
Wait, what's another? Meet Joe Black? What's? I
don't know. What movies?
Double.
I just meant two. I just meant two movies. I didn't mean like two.
Oh, okay.
I want to do a TMNT 2 marathon. I'm going to lose all my momentum if I have to rewind the first one like a chump.
All right, is that cooler than Titanic? I don't know.
Yes.
Who could say? Who could say, Andrew?
You freaking idiot.
Let's talk about Predator 2. Let's go. In 1997, Los Angeles is overrun with crime and gang activity. The police force is outnumbered by the bad guys until an apex predator from another planet starts wiping out drug dealers. It soon becomes clear that the predator is not taking sides in this fight, and anyone involved is a potential victim. LAPD Lieutenant Mike Harrington teams up with a task force that has been hunting the alien, and together they vow to stop its rampage. Simple, straightforward hunt for the alien movie, you know?
Yeah, Hunt for the Alien movie in a slightly futuristic Los Angeles suffering from a heat wave and a drug cartel turf war.
Time is a flat circle. It is funny that this...
I mean, it's a tale as old as time, Chris.
This movie was released in 1990 and takes place in 97. 7 years into the future. Why do you think that is, Andrew? That kind of struck me. Like, 7 years, isn't that ambitious?
I feel like the idea was to move... I feel like I read somewhere that the notion was to be 10 years after the first one. That was the idea. Okay. So that would have been 1997, which just happened to be randomly 7 years after this movie got released. It's very interesting to me, though, how they portray the future. And to its credit, I think it gets it, you know, a lot closer than some other stuff does. You know, there's movies that take place 15, 20 years in the future that are like, well, now you're going to have flying cars, or now you're going to have automated this and that and this and that. And in this movie, the only real difference... The only real difference here is that the guns have some like weird modifiers on them. That's really your own. Like the cars look the same, buildings look the same, everything looks the same. The only real difference is that the guns look slightly, and they don't even look like more advanced. They look, if anything, it looks like that dude who just bought all the attachments for his gun and thinks it makes him look cooler.
I feel like they tried to spruce up the computers too, because like I couldn't tell you like what a 1990 computer looks like or 97. I mean, it's all, you know, pre-AOL, it's all the same to me. But the reason I say that is because there's times where like information comes up on a computer screen and the text, you know, it scrolls really fast, and there's a sound effect that goes with it as the text scrolls across. And I'm thinking like, that's never been a real thing, right? That's only in movies. Like text scrolling is a real thing, but like an obnoxious sound effect as the text comes up, what would be the point of that practically?
I truly, honestly hope not.
That'd drive me nuts. any Gen Xers out there can teach us millennials a thing or two about old computers, right into the show. Let us know. Was that
Yep,
beeping
please do.
noise a real thing? All right, before we jump into the movie, of course, we're going to start with the cast of the film, starting with the high point with the best casting and best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty and elevates the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, go ahead and kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Predator 2?
I just got to go straight to the top. I'm giving it to Danny Glover as our lead hero, Lieutenant Mike Harrigan here. He's obviously tasked with a bit of a Herculean feat to try to follow in the footsteps of one of the most iconic Arnold action performances.
Of Hercules, following in the footsteps of Hercules himself.
Of Hercules himself. And so he doesn't try to be Arnold. Like, obviously, there's definitely plenty of machismo, testosterone still going throughout this movie. Don't misunderstand me. Everybody just has a lot more shirts on. But I think he finds an interesting way to play it, where there's still plenty of like, I don't know if emotion's the right word, but the performance has some fire to it. Because the situation they're in, because the setup of the movie before the Predator even appears is that he's already basically Murtaugh pushed to the limit. He's way too old for this crap now. And he's stuck in the middle of this increasingly unstable situation in the middle of a heat wave. And he's just really, you could say that it's just riffing on that same concept of he's really just doesn't have the time for any of this. But I think he does a great job. I think he's suitably up to the task. Glover himself has kind of spoken positively about this performance, which is cool to see. You get a lot of actors and production people that kind of look back on these things and they're kind of like, But he's kind of like, I think he even said that when he made this movie, he was in the best shape of his life. So I think it's pretty cool performance. And obviously, right at the end, spoilers, when he kills the one Predator, like 8 more appear. There's no fear. There's no anything. He's just like, all right, who's next? And I was like, that's dope. That's awesome. Even Arnold didn't get that moment. So
100%. Yeah, no, I really like this performance. I like that he's, like I said, he's a bit of a grizzled veteran by this point and kind of like barely hanging on by a thread. Like he's been in some hot water and someone's looking out for him to keep his job and everything. So like he's already been pushed to the edge, I should say. And then and then he has to deal with a Predator, and then like his best friend gets killed, and then all this stuff. So like it's really pushing him to the limit. And Danny Glover, he's got that voice that I couldn't even try to imitate right now, but it's very it's low and smooth and calm most of the time. But whenever he does get excitable or does have to scream, whatever, it's like, whoa, like it's jarring. Like it really stands out because of how his normal speaking voice is, and that's like his greatest asset, and he knows it. He uses it to perfection. And this movie, it's awesome. He never, spoilers, he does live through this movie, but never returns to the franchise. Andrew, did you know years later they asked him to come back to the Predator franchise? And you know what he said? He said, no, I've aged out of that role.
So, what you're saying is he got too old for this shit.
Yeah, I mean that didn't actually happen. It's just a setup for my joke there. So I hope it was worth it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Dude, the listeners are cracking up. I can hear it.
Yeah, you can hear it through the speakers.
Andrew, that's a great choice for Mark Strong Award winner. I'm actually taking it in a different direction. Not to take away from Danny Glover. I think he does a great job grounding and centering this film. But this other performance, one of the side players, was just undeniable to me. It's Bill Paxton as Detective Lambert for me. I thought he was genuinely funny. It's a role that we've talked about before. He's clearly there to be like a comedic character, but he's always jumping in, making jokes, and it's easy to become like annoying. And in my opinion, it's not annoying. It's pretty funny throughout. He gets a cool like hero's death, and he is like serious when he has to be. He's not making jokes to the Predator's face and just like joking on the way out. Whenever it comes time to do his job, he does his job. And we kind of got two teams of good guys in this movie. You have like the LAPD detectives, and then you have the task force. And he's my favorite member of the cops, the LAPD detectives. I think he just brings much needed levity to this movie. If his character wasn't in this movie, it would venture on being like too serious at times. Which this movie works. This franchise, this concept is just a marriage of action and comedy. And he brings the comedy. It works for me. I love Bill Paxton and just about everything he ever appeared in.
Yeah.
R.A.P. of course, Bill Paxton. But fun little performance. I didn't know he was in this movie going into it. I was excited when he was, and he didn't let me down.
I agree. I mean, you can't go wrong picking Bill Paxton. And pretty much, I mean, you look at any of his big roles, whether it's this Weird Science, Near Dark, Aliens, Tombstone, True Lies. The dude makes the most of every single minute he's on screen, and this is absolutely no exception. But yeah, his job here is to kind of fill a bit of a similar role to what I would say he's doing in Aliens, where we're in the middle of what could be seen as a very, very dark, drab situation. Different types of comedy, but at the same time, his character in Aliens is very much the one who's like saying the almost deliberately outlandish things to try to cut the tension slightly.
Game over, man.
Start a fire, sing a few songs. But this is no exception. So I think it's a good pick. Like I said, he's also kind of a weird, I wouldn't necessarily say he's like the audience representation in the movie, but he is like the one that like, when all of this is becoming increasingly revealed, he's just like, he's the guy that's like, what? Like, he's like, his mind is blown at all these things they're revealing. And when the Predator starts showing up, he's appropriately
terrified.
His response, terrified, I guess. Like, he's genuinely like, this is not something he's prepared for. It's not something that he was ever expecting. So, but yeah, I think it's a great pick. Bill Paxton is great in just about everything. Like I said, R.I.P. And also Twister rules.
It genuinely, unironically, is such a fun movie. I love that movie so much. Even in like some of his late stage stuff, like Nightcrawler, which was just a few years before he passed away. Yeah. I mean, we all know the Mark Strong of that movie has to be Jake Gyllenhaal, the greatest actor of all time. But he is so memorable and crafts such a memorable character in that movie. I mean, the dude was just killing it his entire career. It would be quite a disservice if we didn't mention his prestige title of being the only man ever killed by a Predator, an Alien, and the Terminator.
I think that puts you in a pretty elite class alone.
Yeah, class of one. That's elite as it gets,
baby. Class of one, because, I mean, Arnold doesn't...
Arnold didn't get killed by a Predator, and he is...
I was going to say, I was wondering, does Arnold get the trifecta of killing all three? But no. I guess because Arnold has technically beaten Terminators as a Terminator.
He's killed a Terminator, he's killed a Predator, but he's never interacted with an alien.
Well, guys...
A xenomorph alien.
Oh, well, guys, there's only... Somebody needs to get on this. We need to give Arnold the opposite trifecta.
Another actor I didn't realize was in the movie until I watched it.
I was trying to think of any other actors that got close. Michael Biehn gets close. He gets killed by two of them, but not the third one.
2 out of 3.
All right, I'm done. I'm done now.
Still
I'm done.
pretty impressive, though. Another actor I didn't realize was in this movie until I started watching it is Gary Busey, who plays Special Agent Peter Keyes, the leader of the task force that is tracking down the Predator. And it's always a little bit jarring for me to see some like older Gary Busey roles, because the Gary Busey of the late 90s and 2000s and of today, he's a bit more eccentric, and he's kind of crafted this, intentionally or not, this persona of being like, I don't know, what's a nice way? Unhinged a little bit, eccentric, crazy.
Yeah.
In a fun way. So it's always a little jarring for me to go back to some of these older movies and see him in like a straightforward performance for the most part. I mean, he screams and yells and gets aggressive at times, but otherwise he's just kind of a straightforward actor, which you know you don't get from the man very much these days. This is just a couple of years after his motorcycle accident, which caused permanent brain damage and a pretty severe injury. So I was actually surprised to see he actually recovered so quickly to start making movies again, because I knew how bad that accident was. But as far as the performance, I mean, he does, I don't know exactly what he's the lead of a task force. He's no nonsense.
Yeah.
Let's hunt this predator down.
It's genuinely like there's no shades of like, you get a little bit of maybe the Buseyisms, as you'd call them, but they're all pretty reserved, and by and large he's kind of playing it straight action by and large. You get the tension there that's got that everybody has. You know, like I said, when I said the movie it's not as testosterone filled as Predator, that doesn't mean that it's not. I mean, there's still a lot of men that are sweating profusely, screaming at each other in this movie, and you know, but he's generally speaking like it's just typical like banter, and then he's got whole action sequences where he's just playing it completely straight. And yeah, it's always interesting to see the differences, the kind of early versus the later, because as like you said, as he goes on, even starting with stuff like Point Break, you start to see that kind of that unhinged kind of part of it start to come through more and more and more, until that's kind of like his thing. By the time you get to Black Sheep in '96, it's just, you know, he's gone.
He's someone else entirely. Love Gary Busey, old and new.
Yeah.
All good if you ask me. This role, the leader of the task force, was originally meant to be Dutch, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character from the first film, but he didn't come back for the sequel. But that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you have a task force that knows about the predator, that knows they exist, and they may be coming back to hunt, of course the sole survivor from the last predator incident would be the leader of it. But I'm glad they didn't like recast Dutch or try to force that whenever Arnold didn't do it. It's a whole, you know, brand new character. Right move. The right move there.
I agree. You could have, yeah. It's, you know, it's that thing where it's like, how you gonna recast Arnold?
Can't do it.
Also, there's 2 survivors in the first Predator.
Thanks for keeping me honest, Andrew.
I try. I just don't want
Blades.
I just don't want you to look foolish, Chris.
Well, now this is all recorded, and I look like an idiot. Ruben Blades plays Detective Danny Archuleta. He's essentially Harrington's partner. I mean, at least they're on the same team. They've known each other for a long time. They go way, way back. And you know what that means? It means Danny is going to get killed, which he does, and it's very sad. But he makes the most of the screen time that he does have. You buy the relationship that he has with Harrington. They really operate on the same wavelength as they are investigating the initial crime scene and working together to try to figure out exactly what's going on. And it's the moment lands when he gets killed. The Predator uses Lieutenant Harrington's voice before he kills him. And it's an effective moment, and Ruben does a good job. Yeah,
fantastic job. Like I said, he's got to make that bond with Harrigan feel genuine, and he's up to the task.
Maria Conchita Alonso rounds out the team of LAPD officers, and it's an interesting role. She's operating alongside Harrigan and mostly alongside Mark Strong Award winner Bill Paxton as Detective Lambert, and sort of a good foil or juxtaposition to both of them, sort of playing off of them, especially Bill Paxton's character, who, as I mentioned, is always making jokes, sometimes very weird jokes, sometimes crash jokes, and she just is unflappable, doesn't give him like a laugh or smile at any point, which just makes the joke that much funny to me as a viewer. But I really like her role here. I like the sort of twist that comes up whenever she's approached by the Predator. I thought it was an interesting kind of wrinkle in the storytelling they're doing here with the character. Good stuff from Maria.
I agree. I remember her also from Running Man, where she gets to also suitably get in on all the action of the film, which I think is cool. But yeah, that was an interesting... One of the biggest criticisms that sequels often get is... The notion that they don't add anything to the concept, they're not doing anything fresh, they're not doing anything new. So anytime I see something that kind of adds to the mythology of stuff, I always appreciate it, just because it shows that, you know, I'm not going to pretend that the idea of Predator 2 was not certainly meant to just cash in on the success of Predator. I'm not going to go that far, but if you are going to do that, I'm glad that they saw fit, especially the original writers, since they did write this, to build out the mythology, even just with slight little things like that.
Yeah.
I think it adds and makes it feel, it makes the character, because these are, generally speaking, silent characters, the Predators, mostly. They do speak some in the original and a little bit here, but by and large, it's mostly all just action. There's not a lot of nuance to them. And so this is something that adds a level of that in a way that kind of jibes with the presentation of the character as well. So, cool stuff.
Morton Downey Jr., no relation, plays Tony Pope, a journalist in the film that is tracking the story of these mysterious deaths that are happening in LA, trying to crack the story, get the scoop, beat out the cops to the scene, etc., etc. You see him often screaming into a microphone or a television camera for his show, which the first time like the title comes up for a show, it says hard, and I'm expecting copy, hard copy. And it says hardcore. His new show is called Hardcore. But it's a good performance, and doing the kind of research behind like who this person is, I had never heard of him. It sounds like it's really not much of a performance, not big of a stretch of an acting job, because this is kind of the kind of stuff that he did in the 80s to get famous.
Yeah, by and large, I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, he was, like we were just talking about it. He's basically a shock jock. He would like chain smoke on his shows, blow smoke at people's faces. He was doing like the Jerry Springer, Howard Stern type stuff before that was really a thing. Yeah, this is really just maybe I wouldn't even necessarily say it's like hyperbole. Really, this is it's basically him just being Morton Downey Jr. And they just they just changed his name for the purpose of the movie. The year before this, I think it was WrestleMania 5. He got beat up by Roddy Piper, but yeah, I mean it's awesome. Basically he's the kind of I hesitate to say what the kind of outlet he's really trying to fill is, but basically he's the one that's reporting on this kind of increasingly hostile situation within Los Angeles and kind of demanding answers, especially as the Predator attacks start ramping up and things start looking weirder and weirder. Kind of culminates with Danny Glover punched him in the face. And then, moving on with the rest of the movie. But yeah, it's, he makes the most of his screen time. He fills his role perfectly. But yeah, by and large, this is just Morton Downey Jr. playing Morton Downey Jr.
That pretty much rounds out our main players of the movie. There is, there's the whole task force to go through, a lot of bit parts, other cops to go through, but those are the key performances, the main players. I do, of course, need to shout out Kevin Peter Hall, who plays the Predator, at least the physical performance of the Predator, voiced by Hal Rail in this movie. But again, like you were saying earlier, it's really the Predator is more of a physical performance. I mean, most of what's being conveyed is done physically through their actions, and so you got to give credit to Kevin Peter Hall for being able to pull that off.
Also, rest in peace, Kevin Peter Hall. Unfortunately, died just less than a year after this movie came out, supposedly due to some issues during a blood transfusion for a surgery he had. Yeah, he's definitely deserves a shout out. Like I said, this is a very physically imposing role. And he's up to the task. I mean, he did it twice. So I mean, he was the Predator in the first one too. So reprising his role, obviously, clearly not as the same Predator.
We get it, Andrew. We get it. Let's talk about the movie. Let's talk about the scenes of this film, starting with the best scene of the movie. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene of Predator 2?
Watching this movie is so weird because it feels like the second half of the movie is basically just one scene that just like continue.
Yes,
like it really kind
100%.
Of is like basically like an hour, maybe an hour and 10. This movie's like an hour 45, and like an hour and change into the movie, they go into this warehouse for the task force to fight the Predator. and then that kind of is the rest of the movie.
Yes.
So it's kind of tough to like really narrow it down. But I'm just gonna go straight to the end. I really like the final fight on the Predator ship. I think you get some cool. We're adding some nuance to the characters at this point. So at this point, the Predator has basically mowed down the entire task force. Everybody's gone basically, and it's just down to Danny Glover and the Predator, 1-on-1. But at some point during the skirmishes, Danny Glover has picked up one of the Predator's weapons to give himself a bit of an edge, and that comes in handy. He uses it to get out of some of the traps that the Predator throws at him, and they end up kind of having a weird sword fight around this Predator ship. But I like the design of this Predator ship. They kind of really put some energy into making this thing look weird. We obviously do get a glimpse of the trophy case, which doesn't have a lot of trophies in it, but has some notable ones, some larger ones. Has a bit of an elongated skull that was immediately identified by most as a xenomorph skull. It would take 14 years for that to pay off, but it would.
It's the same thing as Freddy grabbing Jason's mask in 1991,
3, I think. Whenever that was, and then paying off a decade later. But yeah, it's and then obviously we kind of get our final fight where Danny Glover gets to straight up gut this dude with his own weapon. And the dude eventually goes down. But I do like this little ripple they add at the end where, like, once I mentioned it during my Mark Strong Award speech, but after he kills that Predator and he kind of goes down, like, a dozen other Predators all appear on the ship and basically let him go after giving him this kind of old flintlock style pistol. And it's a very interesting nuance to the idea that by killing a Predator, they're basically acknowledging that he gets to live, essentially. Like, any other situation, he would have been fighting all the rest of them in kind of a typical alien scenario. But in this one, the act of being able to kill the Predator and survive, to them, is, I guess, it's an honor thing at that point. We can't, you've successfully done this. You get to walk away from this, and not just that, but he gets to take this kind of parting token of his own. Essentially, what it is, what it means, we don't know. Some say it might factor in prey. I saw that in one byline that that pistol may have a factor here. Who knows? But
find out this Sunday, and Saturday.
But yeah, so I do like this fight. I think it adds some cool nuances to the characters. It adds more to the mythology, and like I said, I always appreciate when they go and do that. Danny Glover gets to look like a boss, killing a Predator, gutting him like a fish, and then, like I said, all the other Predators surround him, and his thing is like, all right, who's next? There's no fear, there's no anguish. It's really just him's like, all right, I took down one, on to the next one. I love that attitude. It's very prototypical action star. He's probably not going to be able to fight all 12 of them, but he's not going to go down swinging, crying. It's not how you do that. So, I'm going with, I guess, what amounts to kind of the last 5 to 10 minutes of the film there. The final part of this kind of extended sequence that takes place on the Predator ship. And it is interesting. Like, they mess with his head a little bit, because on that trophy case are some human skulls, and it's very much implied that one of them is his partner's. And so that makes it, it's already personal, but that makes it even more, because he's like, oh, not just did you kill him, now he's a trophy. So now I have to do this. And I dig it all. It's awesome.
Very good. Awesome pick. I like the whole sequence, everything you're saying. I gotta say, as I mentioned, I had never seen this movie before. I've seen the first one. I love it. It's a classic. It deserves its legacy. And I'll be honest, the legacy of this movie, I'd never really heard people like straight up trash it, but I always heard like, it's okay, it's a little weird, it's different. I mean, maybe more of a neutral stance from fans of the first one, but I gotta say, maybe it's because that bar was set low from that legacy, but like, I really enjoyed this movie. If you're strictly talking about it in terms of how does it relate to the first one, or how does it stack up to the first one, I mean, it's not going to be as good, because the first one's one of the best action movies, sci-fi action movies of all time. I mean, it's really up there. So it's maybe not going to, you've already introduced this awesome character, the Predator. It's hard to like top that, but it adds
Right.
to it. And I think it adds to it in very interesting ways. And I love the thread throughout the movie. There's so much stuff, and it's going to relate to the scene you're talking about. Don't worry, I'm getting there. But there's so much stuff that is show and not tell throughout the movie that is informing you of these characters. Like in the opening shots in the movie, it's like an all-out war in the streets between the gangs and the cops. And oftentimes you'll see, like, from the rooftops, you're looking at the point of view of a predator. You see the heat vision, and they're studying. And then they start killing the drug lords because they saw the drug lords killing the cops. So you can surmise that the predator has determined, okay, who's the top dog here? Who's the dominant force in this city? And then they go out and kill them because that's what they do. They're an apex predator that killed the most dangerous game for sport, and they keep trophies. And it never explains that. Like, it doesn't tell us black and white, like, oh, we killed the drug dealers because they killed the cops. But you can put those pieces together. And Danny Glover's character is doing that throughout the movie. And again, it's often like in silent, or at least not, laid out to you in so many words. Because there's a part where, like, he's on the trail of the predator. He's starting to realize it's maybe some kind of supernatural force or alien presence or not human. And there's this part where he's like, he looks at a display window of a shop, and there's like taxidermy. There's like, deers and birds and stuff.
Mhm.
And he's looking at it and studying it and kind of like puts something together before he walks off. And that's when he's learning, like, they take trophies. They're a hunter. They're, he's figuring out like what their motivation is. But again, not like, laid out for us. It's just there's these visuals and these moments that are dripped fed to you throughout the movie. And so by the time he has that confrontation with the predator at the very end, he's sort of able to get in their head, and he knows like their hierarchy and what their purpose is. And, this is a creature that has traveled who knows how many planets, it killed who knows how many things. Like, how is this detective, this ordinary human, going to win him? How they make this believable? Well, for one, the predator loses an arm at one point, so that helps. But two,
Yep.
he uses his knowledge like against them. Because another thing you learned is that he spared Detective Leona's life because she was pregnant. He killed everybody else, people with weapons, he realizes, but doesn't kill her because she's pregnant. So, like, there's honor, there's a code, there's a purpose.
Yep.
So, like, during that final fight, he hides the weapon and practically plays dead. Like, he's got nothing left and he collapses. So the predator lets his guard down because it's not like a ruthless animal, ruthless killer. It fights with honor.
Yeah.
But Danny Glover, he's a human. He does not fight with honor. In the last second, he uses that weapon to stab him in the stomach. He outsmarts the predator is how he
Right.
wins. And it's all, it's just you kind of, that moment is built up to so well throughout the film and really comes together in such a satisfying way in that climax on that spaceship. And, we learn so much more about the predators throughout this movie. All the things that I just talked about. We finally get to see the inside of their ship, which we didn't get to see in the first movie. We see multiple predators for the first time, which is so weird that it's not until the very end of the second movie that you get confirmation this is an entire race and not a lone predator.
Right.
Or you see a bunch of them. And yeah, I love that bit. They all show up and you're just thinking like, I've never seen this movie, and I'm thinking like, oh, our hero is gonna die. He gets revenge for his partner, and then he gets killed. Like, that's dark, but that's a cool ending. But they do something even cooler by letting him go, like a show of respect. All right, you've proven you're worthy. Here's a trophy, because that's what we value in our society. Now get the heck out of here. And he gives him that old pistol, and that pistol further explains that they visit our planet maybe every 10 years or over how many years. They've been doing it for a long time, having these battles and collecting these trophies. And man, I love all of it. And a great pick for best scene because it's the last one. It's really where all these threads like come together. Again, in such a satisfying way. But yeah, you're right about that finale just lasting forever, because they get to the cold storage place. They've got these suits on to block their body heat. They're fighting in like a meat packing plant, so the predator is essentially blind. And I'm like, oh man, that's so smart. What a fun idea for the finale. But it keeps going and going and going, and we exit the facility. We fight on the roof. We fight in an apartment building. We fight on the spaceship. We go down an elevator shaft. Like, all this other stuff happens. It's such a fun kinetic ride there at the end that it's great. In fact, my favorite scene also comes from this segment of the film. I mean, it's when the movie's firing on all cylinders, no doubt, this final fight. But the section that I'm going to highlight is, I mentioned earlier, the Predator loses an arm. It does that because it's hanging off the side of a building. It's holding on to Danny Glover. It starts like a self-destruct countdown. It's going to kill them both. So Danny has to act fast and steal the weapon and cut off its arm. And just real quick, we saw it in the first movie too, but we see it here, the kind of his gauntlet with that countdown in an alien language. How smart, how cool is that design? Because like it's not numbers, it's not English or, you know, numbers we would recognize.
Roman numbers, whatever.
Roman numbers, these aren't English numbers. Roman, that's what you call them? It's called Roman numbers?
I don't know what our numbers are called. Roman numerals.
Because Roman numerals are different than numbers. What do you call numbers? Because like they transcend language.
They do. But there is a term. There is a term for the numbers we.
Wait patiently, folks. We're looking it up. We're going to bring you this information.
We are.
Everyone probably knows but us, and we just look stupid. But we're going to figure it out. Would you Google what are numbers called?
Yes, basically. Or like, what's the system? Like history of ancient numeral systems. Roman numerals were developed there. Number 10, 2 is broken across. Oh, friggin' Arabic numerals. There it is.
Yeah. Y'all know what I Googled? I Googled what language are numbers.
Oh, good.
It worked.
Fantastic, folks. Fantastic.
Arabic numerals. So on his gauntlet, it's not Arabic numerals that we would recognize. It's an alien language, but still we can make sense of it. We still understand it's counting down. And that is very smart design and not easy to do. And I'm kind of fascinated about someone was able to come up with this completely alien technology, alien number, and we're able to follow along visually.
I agree.
At any rate, he cuts off the alien's arm. The alien ends up falling into the bathroom of an apartment. And this is my favorite scene in the movie. We have a few threads start happening at once. First, we get the alien in this apartment. And we don't know what they're doing at first, but they're punching a hole in the wall, pulling out some of the sheetrock. They rip a mirror off the wall and crash the mirror. And eventually they form this device and fill it with some of those materials and pour some of their alien liquid stuff into it. It starts like this blue flame. And they create like this goop and start tending to their wounds. It's so cool because, like, of course, a creature that is nothing but a hunter is going to be able to do like field medical work on themselves and have this little kit to do that. So they start cauterizing their veins and sealing off the arm that was cut off and their battle wounds. And it's so cool. And they scream out in pain a few times as they do this. And there's a woman in the apartment that he's in that apparently didn't hear him crash through the wall, but hears these cries of pains.
That's
and
right.
she shuffles out of her bedroom like in a moo-moo. She's slowly walking up to the door. So we have this tension there of like this innocent woman about to walk in on her predator and probably get killed. And the third thread we have is Danny Glover's character making his way down the building and trying to make it into the bathroom to continue the fight. So he's like slowly climbing down this pipe on the side of a building. You have Predator tending to his wounds. You have this woman walking up to him. And the tension that builds here is just so well done. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Who's going to get there first? Who's going to get killed? And it lasts a pretty long. It's like a 5-minute sequence. Like all this happens. Like it let you sit in this tension for a long time. And then finally, before Danny Glover can get to the Predator, he busts out of the bathroom, runs past this woman and into the hallway. And he's on the run. And Danny Glover's character, I keep saying Danny Glover. It's Lieutenant Harrigan, but come on. Yeah, it's Danny Glover. He makes it to the bathroom, and he sees the big hole in the wall, and he sees this lady. And this is what I love about this franchise, this mix of genres here. Because he says, "Don't worry, lady, I'm a cop." And she looks at the hole in the wall and looks back at him and goes, "I don't think he gives a shit." Perfect.
It's a great line. Perfect delivery.
I love that they build up this tension of someone possibly getting killed and this cool stuff about the Predator and healing himself and stuff. And then it builds to this like funny line that totally like lands, and the movie just blends that humor in all the right ways. Like, again, you take this too seriously, this concept too seriously, and I don't know, maybe it could work, but it's a completely different movie. And I think like recognizing that this is all a little bit absurd and not being afraid to have some levity or jokes at the right time and right moments is what makes the franchise special. And I think it's just a great example of that here in this movie.
I agree. But yeah, I do, again, talking about adding things to the mythology, adding things to the situation. This is another great scene that shows just, again, some versatility of the character. Because in the first movie, the Predator really is just a force of nature. I've actually heard the first Predator movie described as like almost a slasher movie, where the Predator is the slasher. And I think that's an accurate estimation, because it builds to Arnold being the final girl. But in this movie, takes a little bit more time with the Predator itself to add that nuance. And this is another great example of that. Just the idea that if it's hurt, he's going to figure it out and try to, like, he starts it when he's already looking like he's on the losing end of this. He tries to just blow them up like he does in the end of the first one. That seems to be like the go-to. If you are in a situation where you are apparently on the verge of defeat, basically a Predator version of seppuku or Harry Carey or whatever you call it. And when that goes wrong, he's like, okay, so he crashes and he's like, all right, now I'm just going to fix myself. I've got a minute. I've got some time to breathe. So to show that side of it, I think is, again, it's interesting. It makes the Predators more fleshed out as characters, and the movie's all the better for it.
So good. And speaking, I give the Mark Strong award to Bill Paxton because he gives much needed. I just say much needed, like it'd be horrible without him, but it helps that balance of comedy and lightheartedness and kind of acknowledging absurdity to go along with all the fun action and at times gory and violent action. And he's got this one line. It's one of something that is always funny to me is like cutting to a scene, cutting to a character, and they're obviously like telling a story or telling a joke, but you only hear the very end of it without proper context. And there's a scene that starts, and he's talking to Detective Leona of all people, and you just hear him say, "The doctor says I need a semen, stool, and urine sample." And I said, "I'm in a hurry, doc. Can I just leave my underwear?" It's just like such a gross joke.
Yeah, like,
and it's so...
Why have you done this?
And it's all that does is make you look gross. Like,
right. Like, you don't look, there's nothing about this that's good.
But man, it killed me though. It was very funny. I do like, it is a pretty violent movie. I mean, that's whenever you see kills and Predators like taking out entire rooms, they don't shy away from just about anything.
It's
There's
some gnarly
blood splatting
stuff,
everywhere. There's gnarly indeed. I love that like net that he shoots over someone and sticks him to the wall, and then like the net itself is like digging into his skin, like it's so tight. Like a lot of really cool practical stuff. But one of my favorite, it's very graphic, but one of my favorite things that kind of continues to add to the lore of Predators, because even from that first movie, we knew kind of their basic deal, that they are there to hunt and take out the dominant force, and we kind of knew they took trophies. But we see them take out one of the gang leaders, kill him, and then we see him like scalp his decapitated head and clean it off to the point that it's like a pristine skull. And it doesn't. It's pretty graphic, but it doesn't show us like every detail, but it shows us enough.
Yeah,
and it shows like this ritual of them doing it. And it's, like I say, it's pretty gnarly. It's pretty awesome.
It's there's a lot of stuff like that in this movie, again, where they show that kind of aspect of the character after kind of not really doing that in the first one. The first one, the Predator is widely unseen until kind of the final act. And in this one, they don't shy away from showing us the Predator and some of his nuance. And that stuff is... yeah, it's pretty rad, but definitely a little graphic.
In that penthouse early on, where he takes out, he slaughters like the whole room, both sides. He doesn't care who's on what side or whatever. Obviously, there's let's see, there's some nudity.
Yes.
He kind of interrupts this thing that's going on where there's a couple that was in bed, you know, naked together. And
as it tends to be, yes.
we see a topless woman. I'm going somewhere with this, Andrew. We see this woman naked, but there's also a few shots, especially when the man's hung upside down, that we see some dong in this movie.
Oh, goodness.
And I gotta say, I am pro dong on film. I think it needs to be balanced out a bit. I mean, you always expect to see a bare-breasted woman, naked women. They're always the one that's like the focus. But you see like a guy's butt sometimes, but you never see like naked dudes, and it's not fair. And I appreciate this movie just balancing the scales a little bit. A few dong shots, unflattering.
Predator 2, Predator 2, trying to balance out the injustice in Hollywood.
Doing some heavy lifting, I tell you. I love that the Predator is something again from the first movie. It's not new to this movie, but the Predator will listen to people's voices so it can mimic their voice. So cool. It's used so effectively. Sometimes it's just used like to tease their prey, but oftentimes it's used, kind of effectively to get the advantage. What I really like about it is whenever the Predator repeats a line back in someone's voice, it's with like a different inflection. Like it technically copies their voice, but doesn't quite know how to speak like a human. So like there's a little kid that sees the Predator like in his camo and says, "Do you want some candy?" And then the Predator repeats that line a few times. But the filmmakers didn't just cut the audio of the kid saying that and repeat it. It's said like in such a deadpan way. It's like, "Do you want some candy?" It's like said like such a weird, like unnatural way, but still in the kid's voice. It's very like unnerving. Or like before it kills Harrigan's partner, he says, "Hey, Danny boy," like real plain and matter of fact, but it's in Danny Glover's voice. It's so cool, and it's just a nice little touch. Because again, the easy thing to do is like copy and paste whatever line the person actually said, but to show that it's the Predator like trying to say the words, but they don't know the meaning of these words. They're just trying to, speak human or fool someone. It's a nice little detail.
I agree.
But take note, kids listening. If a Predator says, "Do you want some candy?" always say no and run away.
Exactly.
Speaking of that little kid, Andrew, that little kid in this movie, he is playing with like a toy gun, like a toy machine gun. And he every time he pulls the trigger, he makes a machine gun noise.
Yep.
And if I may try to do what the kid does, he says like, that's this kid's chosen machine gun noise. Andrew, what's your machine gun noise? You're a kid playing machine gun. What would your go-to gun noise?
Probably something akin to.
Yeah, same here. I think it's like, that's like a heavy D sound. Just sounds like a clown laugh at this kid.
His machine gun noise is just Seth Rogen laughing.
Yes, now I want to see that edit of the film. But the gun, when he pulled the trigger, it made its own noise. Like the gun was doing the work. He had to make his own noise on top of it, and it was ridiculous. Took me right out of the movie.
This is a terrible movie.
I'm sorry.
How dare you?
Hashtag PP. I'm sorry, but no, I
this movie about aliens invading Earth and hunting people for sport. This kid's machine gun noise is the worst.
Weak. No, I'm
coming
glad
here
you're
with
on
that cheap crap.
Glad you're on the side. That's a proper toy machine gun.
That's why I could probably never be in a movie ever. Because like if I was ever like firing a gun, I know in my brain I would just want to go.
Did you hear the story? It's like I think Ewan McGregor in Star Wars, whenever he was swinging the lightsaber, would go like, and then, tell him repeatedly not to do that. Who can blame him?
Apparently, they had a problem with it. They had some boxing movies too. The guys that are boxing would just feel the need to be like, No, guys, we'll add those in post.
My mom told me the story like years later, but like whenever we were kids and play fighting and stuff, we would make sound effects and hit each other and go douche, douche, douche.
Douche.
And she said she would crack up because we're just saying douche.
Saying douche
as we-
repeatedly.
Andrew, there's a scene in this movie. It's where the opening line I used comes from on a subway train, and it's a pretty funny scene because like these punks are trying to like rob this guy with the briefcase, but the guy with the briefcase pulls out a gun, and then like 10 other people pull out a gun because it's it's LA, it's overrun with the crime. Funny little gag there, but it's a pretty prominent scene on a subway train, which I always associate with New York. New York is, that's how you get around subway trains. I don't really associate it with LA. And so here's a fun fact. I Googled it. There's only 2 subway lines in LA. What do you think about that?
That is, that was them predicting the future. That at the time, LA, I think the Los Angeles Metro Rail opened that same year. But the idea of them, a future Los Angeles, would have a subway. And that was them trying to predict the future.
No,
but yes, the Los Angeles Metro Rail, I'm going to assume, is... there's a couple of lines on it now, though, aren't there?
It was a very quick Google, and that's what it said, and that's what I'm repeating on this podcast as fact.
According to Wiki, there's 6 lines.
Oh, okay.
But
they've grown.
They've grown. But it's a mix of subway and light rail. There's only 2 subway lines. You are correct.
There it is. Hey, my fact remains true.
There you go. You're right. But yeah, so this movie was predicting the Los Angeles subway.
Andrew, towards the end of this movie, well, I say towards the end, we mentioned this finale is very long, but whenever the task force is taking them out, and we get the first fight between Danny Glover's character and the Predator in the cold storage in the meat locker, the Predator says to Danny Glover the word mother effer. I won't say the word.
Yes.
Leave it. Do you feel like it's a callback to the first movie?
I mean, sure, in as much as like
it's not the same Predator, obviously, but
obviously,
it's the Predator.
Yeah,
saying
I mean,
that
sure,
to the
probably
human
just a
versus the
nod.
human saying that to them.
Sure, that's just a nod. I mean, the Predator's not calling him ugly, which is what Arnold was calling him. But yeah, I'm sure it was just meant to be one of those. The Predator can kind of speak, but then it's kind of just like you said, it's a flip of the first movie. Little nod,
fun.
Little wink.
I enjoyed it. I really like Gary Busey's death here because Gary Busey thinks he has the Predator dead to rights. He says, "Guess who's back?" He's finally getting revenge on him. And then this is the first time we see the weapon that is eventually used to kill the Predator. He throws this frisbee-like weapon. And the way they portray this weapon is so friggin' cool because there's all these carcasses hanging, these cow carcasses hanging in this warehouse. And as the blade is in slow motion making its way to Gary Busey, the carcasses are getting cut in half. The bottom half is falling off. And that's how you can track the weapon making its way to Gary Busey. And when it gets to him, it's not super graphic, but Gary Busey's kind of behind a pillar. But you see that the weapon is passed, and you see half of Gary Busey's body fall.
Yeah,
it's a less is more situation, but it's just such a gnarly way to show that weapon taking him out. Is super cool. I really like that.
Yeah, the effect comes through in that very, very clearly. Even though, like I said, they're going with the less is more. 'Cause I think originally the movie might have even gotten an NC-17 rating, so they really had to push that rating back, try to get it back down, and this may have been one of those things they had to switch up. But I think it's a like you said, I think it's effective. It's a less is more scenario, but the brutality of it is not lost in this presentation. So if this was something that got changed, possibly for the better. Sorry, Gary Busey.
Yeah, no, I gotta say, I enjoy this movie. If I feel like I'm in the mood for Predator movies, I'm probably watching 1 and 2 and Predators. I go to back for that one. This, I get that it's poorly received. Didn't make a ton of money at the box office. Wasn't as well received critically. Doesn't have the same legacy, but I enjoyed it very much. A lot to like here.
Yeah, deserves a second look if you've never watched it because you've heard your whole life that it's not as good as Predator. I would give it a shot. If you watched it a long time ago and thought it wasn't quite on the same level, I think that's good. I think one of the I think the benefits that you get from these setups is that they do open themselves to different interpretations. Like the setup of the Predator is very simple, just like the setup of like Alien is very simple. Or even taking it to that level, you can switch up the characters. Like, the first Predator, he's fighting like the definition of male action hero and an entire team of massively testosterone jacked dudes. And in this one, we're switching that up, and it's a much more scrappy kind of it's a hardened guy that's obviously not gonna be able to fight the Predator like Arnold can, but he does it his own different ways, and it creates a unique setup. And then obviously by setting it in the city versus the jungle, you create a completely different dichotomy there as well. And I think it's all valid. And then obviously you and I both love Predators, and I love the flip that makes, where the Predators bring the humans to them and start hunting them down. And then the nuance of the characters in that one too, and the twists it takes. I think Predators is also super underrated. But Alien works the same way, where, the first one is a single alien in a situation, and the second one is a far more action extravaganza with a group of aliens versus a group of Marines, and you've got that malleability with these concepts. And I think this movie runs with that in a great way. So it's worth checking out.
Well, glad I finally saw this one. I've seen almost every Predator movie at this point. Of course, we got the new one coming out that we're going to be watching in the Discord this Sunday called Prey. But other than that, the only Predator movie that I haven't seen is The Predator. The reboot directed by Shane Black that came out a few years ago. I haven't heard great things, but you know what? That is going to be the subject of next week's episode, so I will be watching that movie very shortly. Andrew, you've already seen that one, though, right?
I have seen it once.
We got our work cut out for us, huh?
You'll find out next week.
All right, can't wait to jump into it. But for now, it's time for Question of the Week. Heading over to our Discord, looking at the Question of the Week channel. This question comes from That Guy in Doom. Here's what they ask. Since Marvel built towards their big bad with Thanos and the Infinity Stones, what would be the DC build to event? Blackest Night, or Crisis on Infinite Earths, or something else? Great question, That Guy in Doom. Andrew, what do you think they are building to, if they are building to anything, and what would you like to see DC build to?
I mean, I'd like to see DC build to lots of things.
Anything?
I'd like to see them build to hashtag BP. But I think it's an interesting question. Because when we covered Green Lantern, I believe, we're going way back.
Way back.
Way in the way back machine there. That movie teases aspects of Blackest Night. Obviously, it starts and goes into things like Sinestro getting the yellow power ring and things like that. And I definitely think that if that movie had been successful, that would have been a direction they probably would have started trying to go. The problem with Blackest Night is you need a lot of setup to get to Blackest Night unless you make some big changes. I think Blackest Night would be super cool to see on a big screen, but just speaking about the event as it is, it requires a lot of work, and it requires a lot of setup, and it would require a lot of patience. And unfortunately, that setup requires the use of the same characters, whereas something like the Infinity Stones can be spread amongst several different sets of characters. You can with 6 Infinity Stones, you can move that across so that the Guardians deal with one, Captain America's dealing with another, Thor's dealing with another. You can spread that out amongst all your characters and make it feel, I don't know if organic's the word, but it allows you to cover more ground faster by being able to split it across. But with something like Blackest Night, Hal Jordan's at the front and center of pretty much every major development of that story and it coming to pass. And unless you start switching that around, which you certainly could, but either way, it's a Green Lantern thing that features the Green Lanterns and requires the Green Lanterns for almost every step of it. So a Blackest Night movie would be cool. From a cinematic perspective, it just feels like, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's just a lot of work that has to be put into a very singular franchise. and that even Marvel hasn't really done something to that degree, I don't think. Something like Crisis, the rumors are that something like Crisis is in the wings. The CW TV shows did do their own version of Crisis on Infinite Earths that featured some nods and some hints to some things before, like Alexander Knox from Batman '89 makes a cameo. Burt Ward, the Robin of yesteryear, made a cameo. John Wesley
Brandon
Shipp's
Routh
Flash.
was in that, right?
Brandon Routh came back as a version of the Kingdom Come Superman. Tom Welling even briefly reprised his role as Clark Kent, a powerless Clark Kent who gave up his powers for his family. So they did have some fun with that. Crisis is the thing that they're kind of speaking about. Flashpoint was another name you heard thrown around a lot. That was something that was potentially being looked at as a way to kind of soft reset the DC universe, and the Flash movie coming out is still rumored to kind of feature Flashpoint or a modified version of Flashpoint. Obviously, the biggest equivalent for Thanos is Darkseid. And as we saw with something like, say, Zack Snyder's Justice League, obviously that was where the future was going of that story, was to Darkseid. Darkseid doesn't really have the anti-life equation is kind of his equivalent of the Infinity Stones. That's the thing that he uses to enslave humanity. So that would seem like a much more natural, more potentially, what's the term, efficient endgame, no pun intended, to kind of use Darkseid as your kind of big bad to get there.
Yeah, all possible. Maybe if Ezra can get their stuff together and behave, we'll get to see that Flash movie and see what the heck
we will.
They are building to. Comparing the Marvel movies, the MCU specifically, and DC, something that I don't see get brought up a lot. People always say, like, Marvel did it right. They took their time getting to Avengers. It was 5 movies in. They established all these other characters, and DC rushed it. That's kind of what I hear. But what kind of gets lost is, Marvel was kind of forced to do what they did without their biggest players. There's no Spider-Man, there's no X-Men, no Wolverine. You think of where Iron Man and Captain America and Thor were, like, in the public consciousness and the mainstream before those movies, they were all equally obscure. They were names you knew, but not household names. Whereas DC goes to build their universe, and they have Batman, they have Superman that they can use, these characters that everyone knows. So it kind of makes less sense to do, like, a standalone Batman movie, standalone Superman movie. They give you Wonder Woman because Wonder Woman isn't quite as mainstream as those characters, and then they kind of just assume, Batman and Superman, and they kind of get rolling with it. And yeah, MCU was more successful, but I think it's not quite as simple as saying, well, they took their time and they rushed it. Because, again, Marvel kind of had to take their time. I think it worked out to their benefit, kind of establishing these, C-list superheroes and making them A-list. So I would like to see DC do that. Like, you've always got Batman and Superman in your back pocket. But, give Green Lantern another shot. Give us a Blue Beetle. Give us Shazam is a great example. I really like that movie, and that's a character that isn't mainstream, and they did something really great with him. Like, I really like that. Give us more of that, I say.
Well, and that sounds like it's kind of the plan. There actually is a Blue Beetle movie in process as we speak. Batgirl as well, kind of being a weird sort of spin-off of the return of Michael Keaton as Batman. I do think that's a valid approach, and I think that's actually a very valid point. To get people hyped for Avengers, you really did kind of need to show them everyone and be like, hey, these are the guys, and these are guys are going to be in the Avengers, and get everybody hyped for it. But DC has Batman, Superman, and to a lesser degree Wonder Woman at their disposal at all times, and everybody knows who they are. Simply putting them together is hype in any way. Now, obviously, if you have a long gestating story that builds to that, maybe that hype's going to be larger. Or maybe you start with a Justice League, spin it out, and then bring them back for a Justice League 2, and you get that hype going even higher. But it is a valid point. The Marvel model is not the only way to do it. It's a successful way, and it's been very successful. But at the same time, people want to say DC rushed it and tried to do too much too soon. And I don't inherently think that's an invalid stance, but I don't think it's for the reasons people think it is. I don't think featuring all of these characters that quickly is itself the problem. Obviously, you've just got execution and storytelling that you can always kind of look at and be like, okay, this didn't quite land, if you want to view it that way. But you've got these characters, like I said, you've got the whole toy chest at your disposal. And at one point, I remember back in the day, there was a plan to make just a Justice League movie. And George Miller of Mad Max Fury Road was going to make it. And at the time but the weird thing about that is it was being shot. I don't actually know if it ever started getting shot, but like it was cast, costumes were made, the script is written, like they were in Australia ready to go, and then the writer's strike happened and they shelved it. But it would have come out like in the aftermath of Superman Returns and potentially even The Dark Knight. Like, it would have been a Justice League movie featuring not Christian Bale and Brandon Routh as Batman and Superman, and would have instead had other people. I think Armie Hammer, actually, of all people, was going to be Batman. And it's weird to think back now, because at the time I was like, why are you doing this? You've got Batman and Superman already. Why are they not in this movie? And now I look back, and I'm like, ugh, we almost had a George Miller Justice League movie. My God, how have we fallen so far? So
George Miller and production hell. Name a more iconic duo.
Yeah, no kidding. My God, that dude just has no luck with it. But yeah, I mean, so it's an interesting question, and I think right now the actual franchise is kind of looking for that soft reset to kind of get their bearings. But until then, like I said, I think they've got a lot of more standalone projects that are just going to keep coming. Like, obviously, me as a fan, I would love more Justice League event type stuff. They've got plenty of lore to draw on. DC does an event every year. They do a crisis every 5 or 6 years. So there's plenty of places to go. And we'll see what they come up with. But I think something like a Darkseid centric story is a little bit more likely. Like, Blackest Night is cool, but yeah, I see that as something that's the work needed to put into something like Blackest Night might work better in like a television scenario, which there is a Green Lantern television show coming. So I can only assume that they're eventually going to want to start using aspects of that stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, good question.
Great question. And if you want to submit a question, you can do so in our Discord. Like I said, it's in our show notes, a link to our Discord. It's free. I'm not asking for your money. I'm asking for your time and energy and nerdy conversation. And join us, join the community, ask those questions, watch movies with us like Prey, coming up this Sunday, the brand new Predator movie.
Sunday.
But until then, just remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for a link to his SoundCloud. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. It's not that well received. It holds just a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. I hear a ringing, but it's in my ear. It's not in the...
Okay.
I took off the headphones and still hear it. So.
The tinnitus finally catching you.
Looks like it. That's not good.